Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. The first presidential debate tonight between Republican candidate Donald Trump and Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. We'll hear from their campaign spokespeople and talk with Politico reporter Meredith McGraw about what to expect. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson's plan to link a bill to prevent a federal government shutdown at the end of this month to a requirement of proving U.S. citizenship to vote clears the first procedural hurdle. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, testifies before the U.S. House Select Coronavirus Pandemic Subcommittee about the controversy surrounding the high number of COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes in his state. 13 U.S. service members killed in a suicide bombing during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan 3 years ago today received the Congressional Gold Medal in a ceremony in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken calls for fundamental changes in Israeli military operations after a U.S.-Turkish dual citizen activist was shot and killed during a demonstration in the West Bank. Secretary Blinken says that killing was unprovoked and unjustified. Israel says it was unintentional. That and more coming up on Washington Today. Associated Press writes that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are gearing up to take the stage for Tuesday night's debate in Philadelphia, where they'll fight to sway 2024 election voters on the biggest stage in U.S. politics. The event at 9 p.m. Eastern will offer Americans their most detailed look at a campaign that's dramatically changed since the last debate in June. That was from AP. C-SPAN will be previewing the presidential debate beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. Then we'll have a simulcast of the ABC News debate at 9 p.m. Eastern. And when that's over, approximately 10:30 p.m. Eastern or so, we will open up our phone lines, get your reaction. You can also send in comments by text and via social media. Michael Tyler, communications director for the Harris-Walz campaign, was interviewed by ABC News today.
The New York Times Siena College poll shows 28% of voters said they need to know more about Vice President Harris. So what's her strategy when it comes to showing voters who she is and her clear stance on some of the biggest issues in this election?
Yeah, well, absolutely. There's no doubt that tonight is another opportunity for the vice president to continue to introduce herself to a broader swath of the electorate. That's what this summer has really been all about since July 21st, when she became our candidate. That's what the running mate tour, when she selected Governor Walz on August 6th, was about. It's what the convention a couple of weeks ago in Chicago was also about. And so this is another opportunity to introduce herself, make sure that people understand who she is and what informs her values and how she wants to govern this country. That's why when we talk about things like lowering costs for Americans, that is informed by her experience working at McDonald's. It's informed by her experience growing up the daughter of a working mom. And I think what you'll see tonight on the stage is, again, a clear contrast of biography, of values, and a vision for where we want to take this country. Her opponent, in Donald Trump, obviously cannot relate to those sorts of lived experiences. And it's why his economic approach is nothing more than tax breaks for the ultra wealthy, more corporate giveaways for powerful corporations. And I think that's frankly what the American people are looking for, right? Who can relate to them? Who shares their values? Who is actually going to fight for them? And so on all of the issues that will be discussed tonight on the debate stage, Vice President Harris is clearly on the side of the American people. Donald Trump's on the side of himself.
Michael Tyler is communications director for the Harris campaign today on ABC News. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, in a radio interview with host Ricky Smiley that's aired over the past 24 hours, said about the debate with Donald Trump, we should be prepared for the fact that he is not burdened by telling the truth. I think he's going to lie. And NBC News writes today that former President Donald Trump said Tuesday that his biggest challenge in debating Vice President Kamala Harris is that she has shifted her positions on so many issues. Trump told NBC News in a phone interview Tuesday morning, hours before the debate, "You don't know what to expect. She's changed all of her policies over the years." He added, however, that he believes that makes it easier to define her in the minds of voters. It makes it much easier. She's no longer believable, Trump said. That article from NBC News. Trump campaign senior advisor Danielle Alva was interviewed this morning by Fox News Channel.
Everybody who gets on TV has an opinion as to what and how Donald Trump should handle tonight. Be aggressive, don't be aggressive. Be nice, don't be nice. None of that matters. Only thing that matters is the mindset of Donald Trump. So what is his mindset, Danielle, a mere hours from tonight's debate?
Well, I haven't spoken to him this morning, but yesterday he was in high spirits. He is very focused. Again, he is an incredible debater. We saw what he did with Joe Biden, that knockout punch that knocked him off the ticket. The reason that Kamala Harris then ascended to the top of the Democrat ticket. He is ready to focus on those issues. We know that poll after poll talks about the need to lower inflation. We know that poll after poll talks about the need to secure our southern border, the need to bring peace through strength at home and abroad, the need to make housing more affordable. He has the substance. He has the record. In contrast to Kamala Harris, he has the record, his 4 years in the White House, to get the job done for the American people. And that is his task this evening.
Daniel Alva, Trump campaign senior advisor, interviewed on Fox News Channel. Politico national political correspondent Meredith McGraw joins us now for a preview of tonight's presidential debate. Thanks for being with us. The article you co-wrote at Politico.com focuses on Donald Trump and female voters and the fact that he'll be debating a female candidate tonight, Kamala Harris. What are your takeaways?
You know, this election, we've really seen a huge gender divide in voters supporting Harris or voters supporting Trump. And Trump is really lagging behind Harris when it comes to women in national polling. The most recent New York Times Siena College poll had Harris leading Trump by 11 points. And you'll recall in the 2020 election, Biden beat Trump with women by a 15-point margin. That being said, the race is incredibly close, but this is the first time that we've seen Trump go up against a woman since he debated Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And some of Trump's allies and advisors have said that they don't want him to have a combative tone with her that might be a turnoff to those college-educated women that Trump needs, and instead to, of course, just focus on policy and focus on Harris's record.
Kamala Harris herself, since she became the nominee a couple of weeks ago, has not focused that much on the fact that she could be the first woman who is elected president. What might we expect from her tonight on that score?
Yeah, you know, she really hasn't leaned into that when she's been campaigning. But, you know, I think she has been preparing to go up against Donald Trump and what that might bring. And Trump is as well. You know, Trump brought in former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to help him prepare. She debated Harris back in the Democratic primary in 2019 and was able to lob some pretty strong attack lines against her and her record. But she's also coaching Trump on how he should handle going up against Harris. But like you said, it hasn't been a huge talking point for her. And so I am curious to see how and if it comes up tonight.
Do we know what the two candidates have been doing today?
Donald Trump has been down at Mar-a-Lago. He's been doing these quote-unquote policy sessions. Both Trump and his team have been loath to say that he does any formal debate prep. He's not standing behind a lectern and practicing that way. And he doesn't have anybody that's been a stand-in for Harris to help him do mock debates, but he's been holding these policy sessions where he goes over different topics that might come up in the debate and speaks to specific people on his team about sort of different policy buckets. And I know that continued yesterday and today, and he'll be arriving in Philadelphia right before the debate. And Harris is really hunkered down to study up and to practice ahead of this debate. We know she's been in Pittsburgh, where she's been surrounded by her team, and her not-so-secret weapon behind the scenes has been Karen Dunn, who has been a debate prep expert and helper for her for years in the past, and has really been focusing with her on different policy points.
We're talking with Politico's Meredith McGraw. How much of a make or break moment could tonight's debate be?
Well, I think This is obviously a big moment in this campaign. The polls are really, really close, and this is a short campaign. Harris came to the top of the ticket for Democrats not too long ago. And I think the public really knows Trump incredibly well from being president and years of him being in the public spotlight. And for Harris, what's reflected in the polls is that a lot of voters still have questions about her and who she is and what she stands for. And so I think for Harris, this is a big opportunity for her tonight. But either way you look at it, this is a pretty pivotal moment in a close election as we make this final sprint into November.
And there is a room at the Constitution Center in Philadelphia where the debate is going to be held, officially called the spin room, which tells you where we are when it comes to expectations. What kind of pre-debate spin have you seen?
Well, I think for, Trump, they've forecasted what some of his points are going to be up on the debate stage, whether it's going after her record as a prosecutor or as an attorney general. And for Harris, it's looking back at Trump in the White House and January 6th and Project 2025 and some of the different second-term agenda ideas that have come from the right. But I think for both teams, they recognize that the stakes are high here and that this could really impact the trajectory of the race in the coming weeks.
And finally, as a reporter, as a political correspondent, what will you be looking for?
I'm going to be looking for how Trump handles being up there on stage with Harris. If he gets agitated, if he sort of takes the bait. I'm going to be looking from Harris to see how she responds to questions about her own policy ideas and what her vision for her vision for the White House would be. And I hope that the moderators ask some substantive questions that really open the door for the kind of serious discussion I think voters want to hear about what they can expect from both.
Meredith McGraw, Politico national political correspondent. You can find her articles at Politico.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And CNN has an article. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign revealed their lineup of surrogates for the spin room following Tuesday night's debate against former President Trump. The campaign confirmed that California Governor Gavin Newsom, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham will all be in attendance. Donald Trump's campaign has also prepared its own lineup of surrogates, chief among them his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, also former Democratic candidates Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard will speak in Trump's favor following the debate. That from CNN. 8 p.m. Eastern is C-SPAN's preview of tonight's debate. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, we will simulcast the ABC News debate. And when it's over, about an hour and a half later, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll get your reaction by phone, text, and social media. Story from the Washington Post. The U.S. House on Tuesday advanced Speaker Mike Johnson's plan to prevent a government shutdown by a slim margin, with 2 Republican defections, dealing a blow to Republicans' negotiating position in government funding talks weeks before a government deadline. The dissenting Republicans joined Democrats in a vote that almost took down what's known as a rule, a procedural step that governs debate on the House floor. Without it, the underlying bill cannot proceed to a vote. Johnson is attempting to pair a 6-month stopgap government funding bill to avert a shutdown on October 1st with unrelated legislation to require proof of citizenship before registering to vote in federal elections. Funding for the federal government expires September 30th. When the 2024 fiscal year ends, without new legislation, the government would shut down, shuttering vital federal services just ahead of November's election. That was from the Washington Post. Speaker Johnson spoke to reporters this morning about the combined bill before that procedural vote happened.
We're in an era of razor-thin election margins, right? The polling right now in the presidential is the closest that it's ever been. I don't put much stake in that. I'm convinced Donald Trump's going to win the White House, and I can't wait for it to happen. But it will be decided by a narrow margin, if you believe the polls. We have members of Congress, as you know, Mariannette Miller Meeks won her first election in 2020 to Congress by 6 votes. We have members in California who have won their, Garcia, Duarte, and others, won their districts by 200 votes, 300 votes. It matters. If you have a few thousand illegals participating in an election in the wrong place, you can change the makeup of Congress, and you can affect the presidential election. The American people understand this. It is an 87% issue. It's almost 90-10. Doesn't matter what party people are in. They demand, they want us, and they deserve us to take this action and make sure that illegals cannot taint the election. Only U.S. citizens should vote in U.S. elections, and the Democrats apparently don't agree with that. When we put it on the floor in July, 198 House Democrats voted against it. Well, we're going to give them another opportunity, and I believe we can do both things. I believe we can fund the government responsibly, and I believe that we can do right by the American people and ensure the security of our elections. And I defy anybody to give me any logical argument why we shouldn't do that. That's why I'm so resolute about this. That's why this is a fight worth having. It's a fight the American people demand for us, and that's why we're moving forward with the legislation. I've got a few more colleagues to talk about. We'll be doing that today. The rule vote will come up, and then the plan is for the vote on Wednesday as scheduled, and we'll see what happens. I got time for like 2 questions, and we got to go to the gold medal ceremony.
Mr. Speaker.
Come on in. Yeah.
One of the reasons for the opposition in your right flank, including someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, is their concern that you're just going to drop the SAVE Act once the Senate or the White House, they reject this plan. So can you say right now that you are ruling out passing a clean CR at the end of the day?
Manu, I am in this to win this. I believe, as I just told you, this is a conviction I feel deep in my heart. I've been a co-sponsor of the SAVE Act from the beginning, and I think it's something we must do. That's why it's worth fighting for. I'm not going to engage in conjecture and try to game out all the outcomes. I think this is something that we should do, and that's what we're doing. I told the conference that this morning. I'll say it here again. I am resolved on this, and I don't know what more I can say to show that conviction.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference with other House Republican leaders after that morning closed-door meeting among House Republicans. The reference you heard in the question to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, she spoke to reporters outside that closed meeting and then posted a clip on her X account.
I think the American people on both sides of the aisle are sick and tired of lying in Washington, D.C. And why set up a fake fight? Like, we passed the SAVE Act, I think it was on July 10th. We passed it. The House has passed it. For everyone to stand in there and say that we have to vote for this, but in order to vote for it, you have to vote for a continuing resolution that continues the Biden administration's budget, that pays for the Green New Deal, that pays for all these horrific things that people are sick of, it is absurd. It's absurd. And it's going to frustrate people because the base, Republican base, will know that they're being lied to. And they're tired of being lied to. And we have an election coming up on November 5th. The worst thing that Republicans in the House can do is create a fake fight that the base knows they're lying about and frustrate our voters going into November 5th. That's how you lose the House of Representatives on an election. And that will cause problems because people will get angry and go, why should I vote for them?
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, speaking to reporters this morning. The Hill's Michael Schnell posting on X, at least 6 Republicans have said they're voting no. That's on the combined temporary government funding and proof of U.S. citizenship to vote bill. She writes, enough to sink the package if all Democrats oppose it. But Speaker Johnson told me this morning he's still going to put the CR plus SAVE Act on the floor. And today, in a procedural vote, it did advance. It was 209 to 206, advancing that bill and other bills. Debate and final passage on the CR and the SAVE Act expected on Wednesday. Donald Trump, Republican presidential candidate, former president, posting on X, if Republicans in the House and Senate don't get absolute assurances on election security, they should in no way, shape, or form go forward with a continuing resolution on the budget. The Democrats are trying to stuff voter registrations with illegal aliens. Don't let it happen. Close it down. That post from Donald Trump. Congressman Pete Aguilar, a Democrat of California, the House Democratic Caucus chair, said at his own news conference today why Democrats in the House and Senate and President Joe Biden are insisting on a clean government funding extension without that voter proof of citizenship bill attached.
Congress is back in session, and once again, House Republicans are leading us toward a government shutdown. The so-called reasonable Republicans are nowhere to be seen as Speaker Johnson tries to jam Trump's Project 2025 agenda into government funding legislation. Extreme Republicans know that this bill has no chance of becoming law, and yet they want to force a vote that jeopardizes military readiness and veterans' health care. We've seen how this ends. The only way to pass a government funding bill is to pass it on a bipartisan basis. Even their own members admit it. The American people are sick and tired of the chaos, the dysfunction, and the extremism that they see from House Republicans and their failure to govern in a responsible way. House Democrats are ready to extend the hand of bipartisanship whenever possible, and we will push back against the continued efforts of MAGA extremism whenever necessary.
Congressman Pete Aguilar, Democrat of California, House Democratic Caucus Chair at a news conference. Wall Street today, the Dow down 92, NASDAQ up 141, S&P up 24. Story from the New York Times, a congressional report released Monday criticized former Governor Andrew M. Cuomo's handling of the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly his administration's efforts to conceal the true number of New Yorkers who died in nursing homes and shift blame for the deaths. The 48-page report by the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic zeroes in on March 2020 guidance from the New York State Department of Health that directed nursing homes to readmit patients who had tested positive for the coronavirus. That guidance, the report said, had predictable but disastrous consequences. State health officials told the subcommittee that the health department had developed the guidance and that Mr. Cuomo's top aides had signed off on it. That was from the New York Times. Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat who resigned in 2021 from the governorship amid sexual harassment allegations, testified today in Washington before that House subcommittee. Here he's questioned by the chair, Congressman and Dr. Brad Wenstrup, Republican of Ohio.
I don't believe I'm aware of any other state besides yours that expressly prohibited a nursing home from testing returning or newly admitted residents. Only in New York. The other states that have been alleged, issued similar orders, none were in place as long as New York. So many states reverse course. And I surmise, because it doesn't take a doctor to realize that it was a dangerous, misguided plan. Nevertheless, Governor, you've maintained and testified to us since the pandemic that your directive was based on and consistent with CMS and CDC guidelines. You're a lawyer, so you know the difference between permissive versus prescriptive language, I assume. And the word shall and must, are they permissive or prescriptive? Governor, are the words shall and must permissive or prescriptive?
It depends on the context.
Okay. Well, those words are right in the directive. This was not advisory or guidance. You have also claimed that the directive followed CMS and CDC guidance. Did you ever speak with anyone at CMS or CDC about the directive beforehand?
You'd have to ask the Department of Health had those conversations.
So what you're saying is you did not ever speak with anyone at CMS or CDC about the directive beforehand? I'm asking you. I can ask them later, but I'm asking you.
I spoke to the CMS and CDC about a number of matters.
Did you speak to them about the directive beforehand, your directive?
I did not speak to them about this directive, to the best of my recollection.
Not even after? After the directive, did you speak with them?
To the best of my recollection, no. Okay. Nor did they speak with me.
Not even to ensure that what you
No, they never called.
Okay. In fact, no one we interviewed said they consulted with them to ensure the applicable science was being followed. Former White House coronavirus coordinator, Dr. Deborah Birx, she was in charge of all federal guidance in 2020. She testified that your order absolutely violated CMS guidance. Is it your position that Dr. Birx lied?
My position is you deceived Dr. Birx. You suggested to Dr. Birx that we did not have transmission-based precautions in place, and that was not true. As you know, the Attorney General conducted this investigation. This is not new news. These charges were made 4 years ago. You then had 3 Department of Justice investigations that reviewed them. You then had an Attorney General's investigation that reviewed them. The Attorney General of New York, who governs the New York law and interprets the New York law, found exactly contrary to what you are saying and said it repeatedly. And you know she said it repeatedly. She said, quote, the March 25th advisory did not require admission of COVID-19 patients into nursing homes, but rather said the admission could not be denied solely. Merriam-Webster says that means only on the basis of the COVID diagnosis. The Attorney General said, while some commentators, and these were Republican commentators she was referring to, suggested Department of Health March 25th guidance was a directive that nursing homes accept COVID-19 patients, even if they could not care for them, such an interpretation would violate statutes and regulations that place obligations on nursing homes to care for residents. The March 25th guidance was consistent with the CMS guidance. The March 25th guidance was consistent with the CMS guidance. If nursing homes have the ability to adhere to infection prevention and control recommendations, it was also consistent with CDC published transmission-based precautions. That's the Attorney General's position and opinion, and that's the law of the state of New York. And when you spoke to Dr. Birx, you posed the question suggesting we did not have infection protections in place, and that was not true.
Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo testifying before the U.S. House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, questioned by the chair, Brad Wenstrup, Republican from Ohio. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York, a member of the subcommittee, had this exchange with Andrew Cuomo.
You're throwing your staff under the bus. You are culpable for this. My question to you is, when were you negotiating for your multi-million-dollar advance deal for your book as seniors were dying in nursing homes? That is the question in front of you.
You can't make up facts, Congresswoman.
You're the one making up facts. You're the one who undercounted nursing home deaths. You're the one who I want to ask right now. You apologize today, but there are families sitting here. I want you to turn around, look them in the eye, and apologize, which you have failed to do. Will you do it?
This is not about political theater.
No, this is about accountability.
Why did 1.2 million Americans die? Why did more Americans die than any country on the globe?
You're the former governor who's disgraced under oath.
Lie to the
this
people
executive
of the
order was
United
under
States.
your name. It was counter to CDC and CMS.
Let President Trump lie?
This is about those seniors, Governor. They deserve to hear from you in the eye that you apologize, that you were negotiating for a multi-million-dollar book deal. It is a disgrace. There is a reason why you were the former governor of New York State, and you will never hold elected office again. I yield back.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York, questioning former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, before the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic hearing today in Washington. An Associated Press article about the New York order that barred nursing homes from refusing to accept patients just because they had COVID-19 has these paragraphs. The order was issued to keep hospitals from becoming overwhelmed with COVID-19 patients who were no longer sick enough to require hospitalization but needed nursing home care for other conditions and couldn't simply be discharged or sent home. More than 9,000 recovering coronavirus patients were released from hospitals into nursing homes under the directive, which was rescinded amid speculation that it had accelerated outbreaks. There were about 15,000 COVID-19 deaths among long-term care residents in New York, far more than the initial number disclosed. That was from AP. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Watch the ABC News presidential debate simulcast live tonight on C-SPAN 2 as the candidates go head-to-head in their first debate since securing their party's nominations. Coverage begins with a preview show at 8 p.m., followed by the debate at 9 p.m. Eastern. The ABC News presidential debate simulcast live tonight on C-SPAN 2. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics. Powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The 13 U.S. service members killed in a suicide bombing in Kabul in 2021, writes CBS News, were honored posthumously Tuesday in a Congressional Gold Medal ceremony at the Capitol that came 3 years after the chaotic U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. House Speaker Mike Johnson hosted the ceremony and was joined by the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, along with family members of those killed in the attack, which took place at the Kabul airport. The Congressional Gold Medal is the highest award Congress can bestow. President Biden has faced fierce criticism over the deadly evacuation, which Republicans are highlighting this week. And they've drawn attention to Vice President Kamala Harris's role in the withdrawal as the Democratic presidential nominee is about to take on former President Donald Trump in their first debate Tuesday night. That was from CBS News. Here is Speaker Mike Johnson at today's ceremony.
Our nation owes a profound debt of gratitude to these service members and those here today who are with them in Kabul. We also owe them something deeper, and that is an apology. To the families who are here, I know many of you have yet to hear these words, so I will say them. We are sorry. The United States government should have done everything to protect our troops. Those fallen and wounded at Abbey Gate deserved our best efforts. And the families who have been left to pick up the pieces continue to deserve transparency and appreciation and recognition. To you and the families who are not here, I can promise you this: you are not alone in shouldering the burdens from that day. And although we can never fully measure your loss, we can and we must memorialize the ultimate sacrifice that was paid.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at today's ceremony in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Included remarks from both Republican and Democratic leaders of the House and Senate. Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, is the House Minority Leader.
The 13 heroes we are honoring here today represent the best of America. They were beloved sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, spouses and friends who knew the dangers of the mission, but nevertheless answered the call to serve, risking their own safety for that of our fellow Americans, our allies, and our Afghan partners. They defended freedom and democracy until their last breath. They held the gate. The gold medal we are presenting today is the highest honor that can be conferred by the United States Congress, but no honor can truly repay the incredible sacrifice made by our fallen. To the families here, this Congressional Gold Medal also represents our ironclad promise to you. We have not forgotten your pain. We will never forget the ultimate sacrifice your loved ones have made, and our gratitude will be eternal. Our commitment to you does not end with this ceremony. It must be enduring.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the House Minority Leader at today's Congressional Gold Medal ceremony in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. At the Pentagon today, Defense Department staff holding a ceremony to honor those killed when the terrorists on September 11th, 2001, 23 years ago tomorrow, flew an American Airlines plane into the building. 125 people in the Pentagon and 64 people on the plane died that day, part of the 9/11 attacks that also included the plane crashing in the field in Pennsylvania and hitting the Twin Towers in New York City. One of the speakers at today's Pentagon Memorial Service, Admiral Christopher Grady, Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Today, as we gather to observe the solemn anniversary of September 11th, 2001, we are bound together by a shared moment of profound reflection and remembrance. Once again, we gather to honor the lives we lost We gather to remember the courage that was on display, and we gather to demonstrate the unity that was forged in this national crucible. And we gather to reaffirm our commitment to the principles and the values that define us as a nation. The events of September 11th shook the very foundations of our society, revealing both the depths of human evil and cruelty and the heights of human resilience. In the morning of that fateful day, we faced an unprecedented tragedy. The Pentagon, as a symbol of our nation's strength and resolve, was struck by an act of terrorism that tested our grit and our unity. So we mourn the loss of the 125 innocent lives who were taken from us here, and we honor their memory with our lasting commitment to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain.
Admiral Christopher Grady, Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at today's Pentagon employee observance at the 9/11 attack, on the 9/11 attack anniversary. Tomorrow, September 11th, is the actual anniversary date. There will be ceremonies at the Pentagon, New York's Ground Zero, and the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We'll have coverage on the C-SPAN networks. From CNN, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called for fundamental changes to the way Israeli forces operate in the occupied West Bank after the killing of an American activist at a protest last week. Blinken's sharply worded rebuke came after the Israeli Defense Forces said on Tuesday that it was highly likely that she was hit indirectly and unintentionally by IDF fire. In its initial inquiry into the incident, the IDF said that the shot was not aimed at the activist, but at the key instigator of a violent riot. Secretary Blinken spoke in London at a joint news conference with the British Foreign Secretary.
The Israel Defense Forces just a moment ago released an investigation, or released some preliminary findings into the death of an American citizen, Miss Eisenor Enyegi. Could you say, they said that she was killed most likely by Israeli fire, but unintentionally. Are you confident with that assessment? Does the United States want to see anything further? Are you confident with the assessment that this was unintentional? And what more do you want Israel to do? Could there be repercussions?
With regard to the tragic killing of Eisenor, I think what we saw of this investigation is it seems to show what eyewitnesses have said and made clear, that her killing was both unprovoked and unjustified. No one should be shot and killed for attending a protest. No one should have to put their life at risk just for freely expressing their views. In our judgment, Israeli security forces need to make some fundamental changes in the way that they operate in the West Bank, including changes to their rules of engagement. We've long seen reports of the security forces looking the other way when extremist settlers use violence against Palestinians. We've seen reports of excessive force by Israeli security forces against Palestinians. And now we have the second American citizen killed at the hands of Israeli security forces. It's not acceptable. It has to change. And we'll be making that clear to the senior-most members of the Israeli government. Now, we're looking carefully at the results of this investigation, but even on an initial read, and even accepting it at face value, it's clear that there are serious issues that need to be dealt with, and we will insist that they be dealt with.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a news conference in London. Haaretz writes that the family of the American citizen killed by IDF fire in the West Bank on Friday slammed the Israeli army's preliminary inquiry into her death as wholly inadequate, adding that they are deeply offended by the suggestion that her killing by a trained sniper was in any way unintentional. They're calling for an independent investigation. And from Reuters, Russia has received ballistic missiles from Iran for its war in Ukraine, the United States said on Tuesday, as it imposed fresh sanctions on ships and companies it said were involved in supplying Moscow with Iranian weapons. At a news conference in London ahead of a visit to Kyiv, he and Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy will make Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington had privately warned that Iran providing ballistic missiles to Russia would be a dramatic escalation. That was reporting from Reuters. Back to Secretary Blinken in London.
To wage his war of aggression on Ukraine, Putin is also relying increasingly on help from Iran and the DPRK. In these instances, to get actual weapons in clear violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Now, Tehran has long supplied deadly drones. It's built a drone factory in Russia. It's trained Russian personnel on how to operate them. For some time, the United States has warned of an additional threat, the provision by Iran of ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine. We've warned Tehran publicly, we've warned Tehran privately, that taking this step would constitute a dramatic escalation. Dozens of Russian military personnel have been trained in Iran to use the Fata 360 close-range ballistic missile system, which has a maximum range of 75 miles. Russia has now received shipments of these ballistic missiles and will likely use them within weeks in Ukraine against Ukrainians. Russia has an array of its own ballistic missiles, but the supply of Iranian missiles enables Russia to use more of its arsenal for targets that are further from the front line, while dedicating the new missiles it's receiving from Iran for closer range targets. This development and the growing cooperation between Russia and Iran threatens European security and demonstrates how Iran's destabilizing influence reaches far beyond the Middle East.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a news conference in London with the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Blinken said that when the two visit Kyiv, Ukraine, later this week, they will discuss the possibility of allowing Ukraine to use Western nation-supplied long-range weapons to hit targets deep inside Russian territory. President Vladimir Putin, writes Reuters on Tuesday, warned the United States against trying to outgun Moscow in Asia, as Russian and Chinese warships held joint drills as part of the biggest Russian naval exercises since the Soviet era. Back in Washington, the U.S. House this week is taking up half a dozen bills designed to confront Chinese Communist Party government influence in the United States. The first bill today, as Washington Post writes it, would make a college or university ineligible for funds from the Department of Homeland Security if it has a relationship with a Confucius Institute or Chinese entities of concern, defined as any university in China with a relationship with the government. On the House floor, here's Congressman Michael Guest, Republican from Mississippi.
One of our nation's most glaring vulnerabilities is the CCP's attempt to influence our nation's educational system. It should concern every American that billions of dollars from the CCP are flowing into our K-12 classrooms and institutions of higher education. Originally established to promote Chinese language and culture, Confucius Institutes have increasingly come under scrutiny for their ability to influence and control the narrative around critical issues affecting our nation's interest. These organizations have helped the CCP advance its strategic goals and gain valuable intelligence on the United States. Congress has taken steps to address this issue, but more remains to be done. The legislation that we are here to debate today is a critical step in stopping the CCP's reach into the American educational system by prohibiting DHS dollars from going to institutes of higher education if these institutes maintain a relationship with a Confucius Institute or a Chinese entity of concern. H.R. 1516 is delivering on our promise to the American people that House Republicans will do everything in our power to counter the growing threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party. This bill protects American values by safeguarding our institutions, promoting transparency, and ensuring our academic environment remains a space for free and independent thought.
Congressman Michael Guest, Republican from Mississippi, today on the House floor. Congressman Seth Magaziner, Democrat of Rhode Island, spoke against the bill.
While the bill before us attempts to address a real and serious issue, I must oppose it in its current form because it is drafted in a way that is unnecessarily broad and would have a chilling effect on research and scholarship at American universities. Now let's be clear. Intellectual property theft by the Chinese Communist Party is a serious problem that costs United States companies billions of dollars and threatens our national security. And we should be working together on a bipartisan basis to address this matter, as was done in the Homeland Security Committee in the 117th Congress under then-Chairman Thompson's leadership. But unlike the bill that passed through the committee last Congress, this bill before us today would essentially prohibit any collaboration between U.S. and Chinese universities, even when that collaboration has no national security or commercial significance. Think creative writing programs, history, anthropology, or life-saving cures for diseases, researching life-saving cures for diseases. Now, I know that is not the intent of this bill, and that is why the bill needs more work. Let me clarify. This bill uses a definition of Chinese entity of concern that is so broad that it would include any Chinese university or college that has a relationship with the Chinese government, which is basically all of them. So by definition, Chinese entity of concern in this bill is defined as virtually any university in China, and U.S. universities that collaborate with these Chinese universities, including on cultural exchange programs or engagements on subjects like history or creative writing, not related to national security, not related to U.S. commercial interests, would still be punished under this bill. Now, my colleagues on the other side might point out that the definition of Chinese entities of concern in this bill is the same as the bipartisan bill in the last Congress, and this is true. But, importantly, the version in the last Congress had a waiver provision to allow the Department of Homeland Security to provide exceptions to allow collaborations between American and Chinese universities that bear no risk to our country's security or commercial interests. Crucially, the version of the bill we are being presented with today has no waiver provision.
Congressman Seth Magaziner, Democrat from Rhode Island, on the House floor. The House passed this bill by a vote of 249 to 161, 36 Democrats joining Republicans in voting yes. Some of the other bills on the House floor this week that concern the Chinese Communist Party would reestablish a division in the U.S. Department of Justice focused on rooting out Chinese spies, and a bill to exclude the electric vehicle tax credit if batteries have materials connected to the CCP. President Joe Biden welcomed to the White House today the NCAA women's basketball champions, University of South Carolina, their third title in 7 years, and the men's basketball champion, University of Connecticut, their second straight. At the South Carolina event, Coach Dawn Staley spoke about what this moment meant to her, her team, her state, and the country.
Thank you for this incredible honor to stand here in the White House, a house that symbolizes hope, unity, and opportunity for all. Is a moment that is not lost on me. I feel like this is a teachable moment for my team. I'm reminded of the journey of our state, our home state, South Carolina, has taken, how not so long ago the Confederate flag was taken down from our state capitol, a symbol that represented division and exclusion. That moment wasn't just about a symbol being removed. It was about people coming together, uniting for a shared vision of progress, justice, and equality. Today, my staff, my team, and I stand here embodying diversity, inclusiveness, and unity. My hope is that this moment lands on you as my team, as a powerful reminder of the beauty that can come from unifying for a common goal and doing things the right way.
Dawn Staley, coach of the University of South Carolina women's basketball team, at the White House today with the NCAA National Championship team this year. And this year's men's basketball champion, UConn, or at a separate event later in the day. You can find the video of both of them at our website, cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.